everyone, it's Holly, and I'm doing a series of videos. I don't know how frequently they'll be coming out because they do require a lot of time and effort, but this is something I've wanted to do for a long time, and I just didn't know how to like conceptualize it, and then I just randomly had this idea, and I think it's a little like clickbaity because I don't like to be negative. So, but the concept is I want to talk about adaptations and retellings of famous stories, folk tales, fairy tales, all of those kinds of things. And the like concept is smash or trash. So is it a good or a bad retelling or adaptation? Now I am going to talk about like when I discuss these adaptations and retellings, whether or not I think that they're good books. Obviously it's still personal preference. This is all my opinion. So if you like an adaptation I don't like, either as a piece of media or as an adaptation, you're not wrong, I'm not wrong. Let's be nice to each other. So I am going to talk a little bit about like what a retelling and an adaptation are, and then I will talk about the source material, and then I will talk about the retellings, and then I'll talk about the adaptations. I'll also leave timestamps down in the description in case there's only like certain ones that you want to talk about. It really isn't as dramatic as the title is. I feel like I'm always afraid I'm gonna offend somebody, but it's just like, it rhymes, it works. It like completely solidified this concept in my head. I'm also fully expecting this video to be very long, and it is what it is. So like you can see in the title, this first one I'm going to do is talk about Emma by Jane Austen. So that's my source material. And for retellings, there's actually not a ton of retellings out there for Emma. But I am going to be talking about Emma Ever After by Bridget Cody and The Importance of Being Emma by Juliet Archer. And then I am also, when it comes to adaptations, I'm going to be talking about the 1996 Gwyneth Paltrow version of Emma, the 2009 BBC Masterpiece version of Emma, Emma Approved, which is a YouTube series, and Clueless from 1995. I'll also leave links in the description to any like websites or tools that I've used or referenced. I'll also links to the books and movies or shows that I talked about if you want to check them out. Yes, I believe Clueless is the only, I think Emma, the 2009 version, is on BritBox. I don't have BritBox, but I believe that is the case because Alexa Dunn is doing an Austen series for the summer, and I think that's what she said. I own it, so that wasn't a problem. Clueless is on Netflix right now. The 1996 version of Emma was available through my library, but I didn't know that until after I paid for it, but that's fine. I was able to rent it. I rented it from YouTube, but you can usually rent stuff through YouTube or Amazon Prime, or like I think Google Play. You can do that if you're interested. Emma Approved is free on YouTube. It's a YouTube original, not like through YouTube, but it's an original piece of film created on YouTube. So let's begin by talking about what a retelling is. In my personal opinion, if you want to use the terms adaptation and retelling interchangeably, go for it. I think it's fine. They're not really synonyms of each other. A retelling takes an existing story, myth, event, something like that, tells it in a new or different way. It could be set in a different time period, a different genre. Typically people are retelling pieces of fiction, but it can also be real life events, things like that, like think Erin Brockovich, like that kind of a story. So I do think that adaptations and retellings, even though they're different, overlap in a lot of ways, because retelling implies more differences, while adaptation implies more maintaining of the source material and merely making artistic differences because it's a different medium. However, I think directors, writers, editors, etc. modify in a variety of ways to fit what story they're trying to tell. And oftentimes these changes lead to a lot of difference, or like a lot of controversy. And that's where you get the whole like the book is better thing. And I do think you see that more in adaptations than retellings, and I think that comes from this idea of retellings almost subconsciously having more freedom for change, or even more of an expectation for change than an adaptation. So I hope that made sense. Probably not, but whatever. So now I want to just kind of talk about Emma by Jane Austen, the source material. I will tell you, I do plan on spoiling Emma in this video. I'm going to be talking about multiple retellings, multiple adaptations. Like, the book is like 200 years old. I'm guessing that you've at least seen some sort of adaptation of Emma and have at least some understanding of it in today's world, if for no other reason than because of the existence of Clueless. I know a lot of people seem to not realize that Clueless is an Emma adaptation, so maybe you didn't know that, but you've at least seen that. So you at least have some basis for this story. So I'm gonna spoil it without abandon. I'm also going to make references to specific scenes, and I'm not going to go super in depth. I am going to kind of talk about this as if you are fairly familiar with the Emma story. If that doesn't really work for you, let me know, and then in the future versions of this, I will maybe try to be more detailed. So I will give you a short synopsis I was able to find of Emma. It is so hard to find synopsis of like classic books. They just want to give you like this long summary, and I'm like, no, I want like a quick back of the book synopsis. But I'm just gonna read this. It's actually from a Time article I read, and I thought it was a really good, super condensed explanation of what this book is. And that is, Emma is the story of an altruistic but self-absorbed, wealthy and beautiful young woman with a penchant for matchmaking who swears never to marry but falls in love anyways. And I feel like that's a really good summary kind of thing of Emma. So first I want to talk about Emma, the character. So this is a pretty famous thing, like famously known aspect or part of the story in connection to Jane Austen herself. She never expected her readers to actually like Emma. She thought she would be the only person to like Emma as a character. So if you read Emma or you watch these movies and you don't like her, like, that was kind of intentional. I am one of those people that does tend to struggle with unlikable characters as main characters and protagonists in my fiction. So I get why that can be annoying. But Emma, interestingly enough, hasn't been that way. Like, there are people who don't like her. Absolutely. There are people who do not like her. And that was me in the beginning. But, when I was in like high school. But I, like many people, have grown to really love Emma, her flaws and all. And I think that's a testament to Austen's skill as a writer. And I think you could say that for a lot of people who write unlikable characters, but people still like the book, right? But in this case, we're talking about Emma, okay? So I'm not gonna qualify all my statements. So this is not a exclusive to me opinion, but this is probably Austen's funniest book. I think a lot of her books have sarcasm and a great deal of wit, but this is a little more like outright funny. Like, I think it's more of like a light comedy. I don't know. That's different than like sarcastic comedy to me. It is still full of wit and like smart word choice and everything that a lot of people like about Austen. And this, like a lot of her books, does address a lot of social issues that people like Austen were facing. So you have the discussion of social status and marriage and how those two things interact with each other, and a woman's position in the world. You have women in all different positions in society. You have two, specifically, like, let's talk quickly to compare two unmarried women who are in starkly different situations. You have Emma, who plans on never marrying, and quite frankly, she doesn't have to, and she's very honest about this, because she has money and she has station and like societal power, she isn't required to marry. She doesn't need a man to protect her, to give her security, to give her money, because that's not something a lot of women had at this time. And then you compare her to somebody like Miss Bates, who is also not married, but is in a much different situation because she doesn't have money. And so her unmarried state is sad and is almost something to be like pitied, although we'll get into Miss Bates later. Y'all, I love her. But anyways, but you have these two characters who show how your station in society changes what can be expected of you and what you can get away with and what kind of power level you have. I think this, and you see this in a lot of Austen, like I said, it's one of the reasons her books have stood the test of time. It's something that you can still understand and conceptualize, at least in some way, across time and culture. There is also a lot of subtlety in this story and in all Austen. I think Emma is one of those books and stories you have to read multiple times, and then you can see like the layers that Austen is building and these like hints she's leaving to you, to especially see how oblivious Emma is to the things going on around her. I would almost recommend watching an adaptation. If you've never read Emma, I would almost recommend watching some sort of adaptation first, because maybe your first reading you'll see more of those things. But I mean, that's personal choice. I will say I did see an adaptation before I ever read Emma. And now let's talk adaptations. Okay, so let's talk about the 1996 adaptation of Emma starring Gwyneth Paltrow. So I think for a lot of people, this is like the Emma adaptation that they think of. And just for you, I rented this because it wasn't on streaming. And then like a day later, I realized I could have gotten it from my library on Hoopla, and I was really mad that I spent $3.99 on this, but it's fine. It's fine. I'm not bitter. So I actually took notes like on my phone while I was watching it. And so I kind of, before, like, I just want to talk about this as like a film. So I want to talk about like good things, bad things, random things. So I will say, going into this, I remember seeing this movie when I was much younger, when I was in like high school, and not liking it all, like hating it, and hating Emma, hating the story, hating this book, feeling that way because of this story. I am also not a big Gwyneth Paltrow fan. I'm going to be very honest about that. I don't mind her as Pepper Potts, but that's basically the only thing that I've seen her in that she doesn't drive me crazy. So there may be some bias in this commentary, but whatever. So some good things. One, the first one is that the actress playing Miss Bates is hilarious. She has like some grade A quality comedic timing. And also in doing these rewatches, because spoiler alert, I've rewatched a lot at the point that I'm filming this, Miss Bates is like my favorite character. I think she's hilarious and amazing. I would love a book about her. Just saying. Also, Alan Cumming is good. Not a surprise, I'm a big Alan Cumming stan, so, you know. And I typically find Elton to be just like annoying, and not in that like good annoying, but just like straight up annoying, get off my screen, get off my book kind of a thing. And that's universal across every version of Emma. But with Alan Cumming, I'm like, okay, you can stay on my screen and do your annoying crap. Okay. They also do this like almost no makeup look with the characters, which I actually really like and is probably realistic. I know there was some cosmetics and everything historically, but it drives me crazy when I see a historical or a period piece and characters have like a crap ton of makeup on, because I'm like, did we have that? I don't know. So bad things. Again, I'm just not a Gwyneth Paltrow fan. In this movie especially, like, she does this pouty thing with her face that she did all the time, and it drove me crazy. And it's kind of like Keira Knightley has this face that she does in like everything I've ever seen her in. And I don't hate Keira Knightley. When you do the same thing in like every scene and in every movie you're in, like, I'm not an actress, but are you a good actress? I don't know. There's some random voiceover from Emma, and I normally like voiceover. Like, I'm not one of those people that thinks voiceover is the devil and you should never have voiceover in your films, but I didn't like it here. It felt very weird, and it just felt like a cheap way to get exposition across. It didn't work for me. They also do some of these comedic cuts, and as I was writing my notes, I was like, I don't like this cut thing that they're doing. And I'm like, initially I thought I was just being really judgy of the film, and I was like, you're just bitter because you don't like this movie, you don't like Gwyneth Paltrow, stop it. But in retrospect, having completed the movie, I think I figured out why I don't like it and why I don't think it works. And that is because they also use it for non-comedic transitions. So it's the transition where it's like a fast cut, like usually you're on like somebody's, like you're on Emma's face. And then I think they do this with the party at the Coles, where she's like, no, I would never go to a party there, because she's like, man, she hasn't gotten an invitation. And she's like, no, I would never go. And then it's on her face, and then it like cuts and she's at the party like, oh, thank you for inviting me. And I think that's a very good use of a transition in a comedic way, but they also use it to just like show passage of time basically. And because it's not consistently used comedically, it's used for multiple types of transitions. I think my brain just starts to be like confused about what it's supposed to be seeing, and so instead it just gets bothered by it. Some random things, not good, not bad, just whatever. One is Ewan McGregor's hair. Like, that's a look. And then the other is, this felt very fast, especially in the beginning, and it's really weird because it's 2 hours long. So they had a good amount of time to work with. So I don't know, but it just felt very rushed in a lot of ways. Let's talk about this as like an adaptation. It's an adaptation. It does hit a lot of the story beats of the actual Emma story, obviously. Like I said, it is 2 hours long. I don't think it made good use of that time to build some of the characters and some of the relationships. And it almost felt like if you don't know the original, like, do you 100% commit to this? Like, do you buy these relationships between these characters? And I think in a lot of ways, like, I know people hate cutting, but this is why you have to cut stuff. So like, maybe cut things. Yeah, because I just wonder how clear those relationships are. I do think that it wasn't as funny as it could have been. I think Miss Bates, like I already said, I thought she was hilarious. She definitely brought her A game. She provided some quality humor. Thank you. True hero. And Mrs. Elton, I feel like I know this actress and I just don't know where from. She's probably just like a character actress that's in a lot of like period movies or something. But she did a really good job too, I think, and worked very well. And I liked the Knightley character and like what they did with Knightley, but I like Knightley in the book, so I think I'm just predisposed to always like Knightley. And again, having read and watched a lot of retellings and adaptations as of filming this, I make a lot of excuses for the Knightley character in a lot of these, and I think it's just because I like him. Smash or trash? This one is really hard for me. So I planned on going into this. I was like, I'm gonna come in and I'm gonna say flat out trash, because I do not like this adaptation. And so for me personally, it is a trash. However, I can see positives and I can see why people like this and like this adaptation. And I do think it is a decent adaptation. It's not horrible. It's not atrocious. It's just not for me. And I think if anything, it probably is a good or decent adaptation, and it's just not a good movie. And there is a difference between a good movie and a good adaptation. While I don't like this movie, I guess it is a decent adaptation. So now let's talk about Emma Approved. I still don't know how to talk about this because it's not a film. Like, whatever, it's a YouTube series. It was created or like released in 2013 and 2014 here on YouTube. The YouTube channel is called Pemberley Digital. It was created by the same team for the most part that brought us the Lizzie Bennet Diaries. I did watch the Lizzie Bennet Diaries as it came out. I started Emma Approved, but I never really got into it, so I stopped watching it. I do subscribe to the channel, but for this project I started over and I watched all 72 episodes. That is how long it is. They're usually about 4 to 7 minutes long. It's not like a horribly long time commitment. I did not watch them like in one go. I think I watched it over like 4 or 5 days. So it was written by Bernie Sue, who is the same man who wrote the Lizzie Bennet Diaries. There's other writers too, but he's the main writer. It is a modern day adaptation of Emma, which I like because then we can kind of compare this to Clueless, although like almost 20 years have passed in between the two of them. And Emma in this is a lifestyle coach, matchmaker, seeking lifestyle excellence. I don't know. She is filming a documentary to be used in the future when she is honored for her supreme excellence in helping people achieve lifestyle excellence or whatever. I don't know. She says it a lot and yet I still don't remember what she said. Generally, I'm going to say I think this is the least well-known adaptation of Emma, just because it's on YouTube, if nothing else. I think Clueless, even if people don't realize it's an Emma adaptation, that's a hugely popular film. It became a TV show as well, but it was an incredibly popular film. I think it's, I hesitate to say a cult classic, but especially personally, I found a lot of Emma Approved a little forced. I think it was trying to be campy, which, do not get me wrong, your girl likes some camp and some corny comedy, so say this lightly. But it didn't really come across, I think, the way that they intended it to come across. Like, it just wasn't funny. It felt like a lot of times things would happen and I would be like, that's supposed to be funny, but it wasn't funny. Now, I'm not a writer, like, and I'm most definitely not a comedic writer, so I do think it's very hard to do, but I think not that this is fair, and I'm not letting this weigh into whether or not I think this is a good adaptation. I think the Lizzie Bennet Diaries is just so superior, and almost if this came first, maybe it would have been better. I don't know. Although I will say, the badly done Emma scene with Knightley was spectacular. I don't know if the actress who plays Emma is just maybe a little better at slightly more serious stuff, or if it's just because that scene is so full of emotion in general that it's just like, it's always going to be a gut punch scene. Like it's like the when Emma makes fun of Miss Bates scene. That scene always gets me. Like, it always makes me emotional. So maybe it was that, I don't know, but that scene, that episode was 5 out of 5. I also think the vlog format of this didn't quite work. I think it worked in the Lizzie Bennet Diaries, but here it was just like, you asked me to suspend my disbelief way too much, that it just felt forced. I understand why they did it. They kind of want it to be as if Emma is doing a YouTube video and not as if this is just a film cut down and then put on YouTube. And I get that. It just didn't 100% work. I will say this is one of the last adaptations I watched, and I think I have a bias when it comes to these stories, and that is that I am huge fans of Miss Bates. It's Maddie Bates in this story, and Knightley. I find that across all of the adaptations and retellings, those characters, I like almost make, I don't know if I'm making excuses for them or if they're just better written and portrayed. But I'm finding I'm enjoying them and pulling them out as quality actors, characters, whatever, over and over again. The actress who played Maddie in this adaptation was spectacular. She was probably the best actress in the whole series. She's also older, so I don't know if maybe she just has more acting experience than the others, but she was like such a scene stealer, and she worked so well, and she did such a good job of being like comedic but also being like naive, and then being very nice to Emma, and like I just wanted to hug her. I wanted her to be like my aunt. I don't know. She was amazing. One of the things they did in here was they gave the Robert Martin character a little more airtime than I feel like you typically see, and I actually really liked that. I think he's a sympathetic character, and I've always felt bad for him, but I don't think he gets a lot of play, and it hurt my heart because like I grew more attached to him, and so then like when Harriet turns him down and then everything that happens there, it was sadder, which actually is a good thing, I think, because you get more emotionally invested, and you're not just invested in Harriet's story, you're invested in Robert Martin's story as well. There's also a ton of diversity in this cast, if that's something you're looking for or like something you like to see. I think it's good. It works really well. Like I said, this is a modern adaptation, not a period piece, and so I think that there is generally more changes made because of that. If nothing else, because society is a little different, and setting is obviously different, and just culturally things are different. Like marriage is less of an important thing. Not that marriage isn't still important in our society, whether you think it should or should not be, it still is, but it's definitely not something you can like put this heavy weight on. Also, you have different things like Mr. Elton, like especially in the US, clergy isn't like necessarily a position of power or like a higher level of society, and that's still kind of something that you have here. Emma is definitely a wealthy person, and she works with wealthy people, so Elton here ends up being a senator, and I actually think that's a pretty good change to make the story work here. Although I think the whole Elton storyline, especially with Mrs. Elton, it was just weird. I didn't understand the choices that they made, but whatever. I mean, you gotta make choices and sacrifices, I guess. And honestly, I'm never really bothered by modernization of like historical or classics and then the changes that people have to make, and I think it actually is a particular challenge to creators, because you still need to like have some sort of the heart of the source material but make it realistic to modern time periods. I will say, even though I said that Elton thing was a little weird, the core plot and plot points are here. You know, you have Emma and Harriet, you have Knightley and Emma knowing each other for a long time, you have Emma interfering in people's dating. Here is dating, not so much marriage, although marriage to some extent, lives. You have Jane Fairfax, you have Frank Churchill and Jane Fairfax, and this like weird dynamic there. You have kind of like a big party situation. You have Emma offending Miss Bates. You have the badly done Emma scene. Like, it does follow a lot of the plot points and beats. I did think a lot of them fell flat. I don't know if it's because of the vlog documentary format, and perhaps some budget constraints as well. But we didn't get to actually see a lot of pivotal scenes. Like the Miss Bates scene doesn't happen on camera, it happens off camera, and then Knightley basically chastises Emma for it. And I just think there's something to be said for seeing that scene and seeing Emma go that far and do something so horrible to Miss Bates, who does not deserve this treatment at all. And I think that's crucial to Emma's development as a character. And so to not actually see that mistake, I feel like negatively impacts her character arc. I'll also say just generally, I felt there were some pacing issues. Again, I think it's the formatting choice. I'd be curious to know if you watched it straight through, if you would still feel the pacing issues. I think you would. But you're taking like a pretty chunky book and trying to put it again down into like 2 hours worth of content. This might be longer than that, but still, I think it is a challenge. And so like the fact of the matter is then you have to cut stuff. Like that's your job when adapting something. You have to cut stuff in order to like lack those pacing lags. I will say here, Jane Fairfax is a much more forceful character. I could see some people being upset about that. I wasn't really bothered. I think she was still very much so Jane Fairfax, but it felt more realistic to today's society. Like I don't think I don't think she went over the top in like the forcefulness, both in like how she was written and how the actress portrayed her. It just felt very real, and it would have almost felt like, I'm not sure a Jane Fairfax that's kind of like docile necessarily works in a modern day setting and have that be a character that we would still sympathize with or like. Although I will say the Jane and Frank storyline I think was pretty weak throughout this. I think this is something that really did suffer from being a modern retelling or a modern adaptation, is like why their relationship is a secret. And I was wondering the whole time what they were gonna do, and the explanation made no sense to me at all. Like, no. I don't know. Ugh. I'm not sure what I would recommend for a different reason, but this one just did not work for me. And I think in a lot of ways this story is like, this plot point relied heavily on the viewer kind of already knowing this story. I will say generally I thought the characters worked. Emma's oblivious, rather selfish, but she's truly a good person. Like, she does mean well, even though she screws up a lot of people's lives. Harriet is ditzy but a good person. I actually did really like Harriet here. I think they did a good job of having her be kind of naive and ditzy, but also being an independent woman. She's just easily like manipulated by Emma, which is true. She is, like, in the source material too, but I think they found a nice balance for her character. Frank is over the top and dramatic. Maddie is the true star. No one deserves her. She is a gem. There are some missing characters. Like I said, the Elton storyline doesn't flow quite right in my opinion. Mr. Woodhouse is mentioned but not really prevalent. I don't think you need the Mr. Woodhouse character on screen. However, I like him. Like, my heart really loves Mr. Woodhouse, so I was sad by his absence, but I will go on. Because adaptations can't keep everything. Smash or trash? I guess smash. Sure. I think I'm struggling because smash and trash are like really strong words, and I think this is a very mediocre piece of media and a mediocre adaptation. I think they did a decent job of modernizing the Emma storyline, and it has a lot of the same essence of the original story. Like, the characters, there's a lot of the plot points. They do address some societal issues, whether or not I think they did them well or not, but overall it's just mediocre. It gets like 3 stars, except Maddie. She gets 10 out of 5. She is a star. We stand Miss Bates, Maddie Bates, in this house. That's it. Okay, so now let's talk the 2009 BBC masterpiece, The Camera is Moving Because of the Stupid Cat, miniseries adaptation of Emma. This stars Romola Gary as Emma and Johnny Lee Miller as Mr. Knightley. And I'm going to be completely honest with you, I love this adaptation. Watching this adaptation when it first aired is actually what made me love Emma the story. So this adaptation is actually what made me love Emma the book, the story. When I reread the book after this, I had a new appreciation for it. So I'm gonna tell you, there's a lot of like emotional stuff invested in this. Also, Johnny Lee Miller was in one of my favorite TV shows ever. Shout out, it's called Eli Stone. If you live in the US, you can watch it on the ABC app. It's under their throwback section. Oh man, gone too soon, gone too soon. And like nobody has heard of this show. So this is a longer adaptation. Obviously it's a mini series, so it's about 4 hours long. So they definitely have more time to work with. However, in my personal opinion, when you choose to adapt something, you choose the way in which you adapt it. So you have to react accordingly as a creator. I do think this allows them to spend more time with the characters and plot points. They're able to more successfully hit plot points than say the 1996 version with Gwyneth Paltrow. You have more time to like sit with the characters, get to know them, and connect with them. They do like a little backstory childhood setup thing, which I thought was really cute and fun. I don't remember that at all, but I haven't seen this in years, so it's not a surprise. The clothing and the scenery in here are just so rich. The 1996 adaptation, like I hate to just constantly compare them, but I do, sorry, is just so inferior to this adaptation when it comes to just like the richness. It feels more real, and it, like, I don't know how the 1996 version was filmed, if it was filmed primarily like on sound stages and stuff, and if this is filmed more like on location, I don't know. But this one just feels more fleshed out and real. This version does a really good job of giving those layers to the characters. Again, I think this is something when you have a longer adaptation with a longer piece of fiction, it gives you more time to build in those layers that are there. And the writers and directors, our director is doing a good job with this time. Like, they're using the time wisely. Just because you have more time doesn't necessarily like automatically mean your story is going to be better. You still have to use it wisely and correctly. And no matter what anyone says, film and books are two different mediums. You are going to have to tell stories differently to get the same feeling and emotion. So the writers, the director, the actor, the like DP, the photography, the costume creation, the makeup, they're all gonna have to work hard to create something. I will say I noticed that Jane Fairfax in here comes across as more of a character than she does in like the 96 version. There she's almost like a piece of scenery. Like, does she even talk? I don't remember her ever talking. And I kind of like her talking. Like, I mean, she talks in the book, and I like her being more of a character here. I will say I think the cast and crew, can I praise them enough? I think they do a really good job of using their scenery, using the lighting, using the clothing, everything, the world around them. Like, Romola Gary and Johnny Lee Miller, they just feel like so at home, like in their environment. It feels like they live there. It feels like they are Emma and Knightley. And I just love Romola Gary's portrayal of Emma. I think she does this really good job of embodying this flawed, selfish character who is, in my opinion, a really good person. Like, she means well, but just because you mean well doesn't mean that you don't make mistakes and you aren't stupid. And I think her portrayal of Emma is honestly what changed my opinion on Emma the character. It made me realize that you could like this character and you could see beyond her flaws. So again, maybe I'm just biased. And then can I take a moment to talk about Mr. Woodhouse, because I'm not sure I've talked about him a lot in these videos. This is one of the last ones I'm filming. I love Mr. Woodhouse. I do think I said that in something because I think he was missing from like Emma Approved or something, and I said I missed him. And he is kind of a funny character, right? Like, he's really ridiculous. But I don't know, I will say I have like a prejudice towards old men. I've always been this way. Like, I don't know if it's because I had really positive relationships with both of my grandparents, like both of my grandfathers and my grandmas, but like my grandfathers were great in my life, and now they've both passed, but even when I was younger, when they were both still around, I felt this way. I just have a soft spot in my heart for old men, and they can do no wrong, which is not true. Old men can be evil people too, I know this, but I just have like this natural default setting of loving them, and Mr. Woodhouse fits that. And I believe it's Michael Gambon playing him here. I'll correct that if I'm wrong. He does a really good job of making him this like kind of pathetic but funny but likable character. And I think sometimes in adaptations and retellings it becomes more of a laughing at him a lot, and that always makes me a little uncomfortable. I don't think this one did that. Maybe I'm overanalyzing this because of my previously mentioned bias about old men. I don't know. And I will repeat, I know I have said this in other versions of this, but Miss Bates is a star. And I need a Miss Bates story. I just, like, I don't necessarily need her to have a romance, although that would, like, make my romance loving heart so happy. But I just need, like, a story about her. Like, I just want to know about her life, and maybe it's because I talk a lot, so I connect with her. I don't know. I love her. So, smash or trash? Really? This should come as no surprise. This is smash. To me, this is the best adaptation of Emma. This is the Emma adaptation, especially if we're talking period pieces. Now, I've not seen the 2020 version, so if you think that is the best one, don't, like, at me or whatever. Like, you're entitled to your opinion. Even if I had seen it and I didn't like it, you're still entitled to your opinion, obviously. But to me, this is the best adaptation. Like, it is just, it has the feel, it has the characters, the vibe. I love every part of it. Like, I almost cannot criticize it in any way. I'm sure I could find something, but you know. So let's talk Clueless. So Clueless was released in 1995, and oh lordy, let me tell you, it was released in 1995. So it is currently on Netflix. That is where I watched it. I thought I owned it, but I couldn't find it in my DVD collection, so I guess I don't. I don't remember the last time I watched this. It is definitely a dated movie, which, I mean, obviously, like, especially I feel like the 90s is a particularly dated time period, the clothing, especially from a clothing perspective. However, here I think specifically the language is dated. I am definitely the last person to call something problematic. Not to have like a debate about that, but I can see when things might bother people. And I will tell you, watching this, there was definitely some like word choices that would never fly today. Probably wouldn't have even been okay like 10 years ago. But this movie is 25 years old. And even if it has those problems, I still think it's a good movie. I still think it's funny. I would still watch this movie. I would still recommend this movie, but if you are bothered by that stuff, then proceed with caution, I guess, if you've never seen it. So this is obviously a modern set adaptation of Emma. It is probably also, of the ones I read and watched, the least accurate in following specific storylines, having like one-for-one characters, that kind of stuff. I will say personally, I think I've said this, I may have said this in this video before, but I think I've talked about this before in adaptations in general. I'm okay with that. I'm one of those people that understands adaptations can't line up completely with the source material, and I think especially something like this where you have a classic from like 200 years ago, you're gonna need to make changes. So that doesn't necessarily bother me. So I would say that Brittany Murphy's character, Ty, she's the Harriet Smith character here, is probably her storyline and everything is probably the most loyal storyline to the original. And Cher is our Emma character. That's Alicia Silverstone. She is very much Emma. She's a wealthy woman slash girl. She's 15, 16 in here, who doesn't understand the struggles of those around her, especially from like a class perspective. The whole like subtle sarcastic commentary on class there, I think is pretty funny. But she's genuinely a nice person, and again, like Emma, means well. I will say the relationship between Josh and Cher, which would be Knightley and Emma in Clueless, even when I was younger, has always rubbed me the wrong way. I don't hate it, like I think it's overall my impression is it's fine, but he is her former stepbrother. I don't think they were step siblings for very long. That's not what really bothers me. I think it's weird, but it doesn't really bother me. What bothers me is the age gap. And this time watching it, I realized, whoa, what kind of age gap are we talking about here? Because she is explicitly 15 at the beginning of the movie and then turns 16 and gets her license. And he most definitely is not a freshman in college. And I'm not just doing that based on looks, but the way they build this character, he has obviously been in college for a while. Which means at minimum, if we're being generous and he is a freshman, there's a 2-year age gap and he is over 18. And I don't know. I don't like it. But at the same time, it does line up kind of with the original. So if you don't know, in Emma, Knightley is, I think he's like 16 years older than Emma. He is a teenager when she is born. He is there through her whole upbringing. And I will say, in reading Emma, like originally that was something that kind of gave me pause, but obviously like different time periods and stuff, things were different then. I mean, it's loyal, and I do think that's kind of why they did it, also because Josh being in college, he has like a different perspective on life, so you have that aspect to it, so he can kind of influence Emma and judge Emma and be a foil to Emma's, or in this case Cher, I guess, Cher's like ignorance. I think I already said this, I think this movie is very funny. Cher and Dion are so oblivious to the world around them, you know, but they're also teenagers. Like, they're wealthy, and obviously there's a layer there, right? Like, there's, to some extent, if you're wealthy and you are never exposed to a different socioeconomic like area, maybe you do become naive. You're just naive, you're ignorant. I think to some extent teenagers are always going to be that. Like, teenagers just inherently are going to be self-centered people, and it's not a diss on teenagers today. This is all teenagers. I was like this, my mom was like this, my dad was like this, like my brother was like that, like everybody's like this. People are self-centered. Like, you have to be self-centered to some extent in order to live. So it's fun, but I think it's very funny to see them be so oblivious and like what they care about, and like it's so funny. But again, I do think that they're good people. I think both Cher and Dion are good people. I think, you know, like, they want to help Ty. They want to help other people around them. And whether or not they have good intentions all the time, you know, they still do good things. Also, Cher does learn to become a better person throughout this movie. Instead of her making like a big mistake in the Miss Bates element, it's actually Harriet that makes the big mistake, like says something, and that triggers a change in Cher. Harriet meaning Ty. This is getting so complicated, too many words, too many names. But she does learn from this, and she does grow, and Dion grows, and I think Josh even grows. Like, he learns from Cher, and Ty grows and learns. And that is something you see in Emma. You see her learn and grow. I think she's always going to be herself. She's always going to be a little oblivious and everything, but, you know, she does learn lessons. Smash or trash? I'm going to say smash, personally. Obviously, I like this movie. I think that comes across in this, right? But I think that the writers and the director did a really good job of translating the story of Emma to modern day, aka 1990s, high school Beverly Hills. I think they did a really good job of doing that. They kept the parts of the story and that they could translate easily without it feeling forced. They kept the essence, a lot of the themes of the story. I think they kept like this kind of sarcastic humor that you as the viewer kind of sees the things that are going on that the people in the story don't see, and they got rid of the things that didn't work. in that setting. And I think that that's an important thing to do in creating an adaptation, especially a modern set one. So yeah, I think this is a really good adaptation, and I think it's a good adaptation where you are straying a little. And I think this is something that, one, people are more accepting of when it comes to classics, but I think people should maybe be a little more accepting of in general, because film and books are different mediums. So let's talk an Emma retelling. So we're going to talk about Emma Ever After by Bridget Cody. This is another hard one for me to talk about. I did not like this book. I gave it 2 stars. I thought it was not a good book. I probably would have DNF'd it if I wasn't reading it specifically for this video, and also if there just wasn't like not a lot of retelling options for me, so I basically went with what I could find. But I'm going to try to mostly talk about this as a retelling and not as a poorly written novel with weak character development. So it takes place in current day London. I would call it kind of like a chick lit novel with some romance in it. Emma is in PR. She mainly makes fake romances, fomances, for celebrities to like boost their popularity or whatever. So you have that like connection. I actually thought that was like a cute connection to the original. And you have Knightley, who is actually a former boy band member whose career ended after he stood up for one of his friends who came out as gay, and he came out as bi. And that was something that they were like, you can't do this, boy band members have to be straight. And Emma is now working with a boy band, setting up fomances for some of them, but they don't like it. Things happen. Generally, this followed a lot of the same story beats as the original. There's a Harriet character. It's actually a guy in here, which was interesting. He's Emma's assistant, and that his whole storyline was very similar to the original Harriet. That seems to be like a character that in a lot of retellings and adaptations, especially ones that aren't like true period set pieces, they don't seem to really change the Harriet character that often. I mean, I don't know like what you would do to change, but that one's like pretty static and consistent across them. Like I said, Emma is a matchmaker type of person. She's also incredibly oblivious to things around her. Knightley was a nice, likable guy looking out for Emma. Again, I like Knightley. I think I said this before. I'm just a sucker for him. I think he's a great guy, so I tend to like his character no matter how bad the book is. And he kind of tries to guide Emma down the right path, and she doesn't listen. There are some missing characters from the original, so I think a lot of times when you have stuff like this, there's certain characters that like you love and you want to see. There's no Mr. Woodhouse in here, and I don't think there was even really like a Miss Bates, which oversight, because I think I've already said this in this video. Miss Bates is like Holly's new favorite character, and she deserves some representation. But I also missed Mr. Woodhouse because I tend to like him in the book. I don't, there's another retelling I'm going to talk about, and I did not like what she did with him. But I tend to like Mr. Woodhouse. And I think that one of her friends, like her and Knightley have like a group of friends mainly surrounded around like his ex-boy band members and stuff. I think that one of them is supposed to be kind of the Mrs. Weston character, but I'm not really sure. But a lot of that changed, but I wasn't really bothered. Again, I like when authors kind of make things a little bit their own and aren't just following straightforward like the source material. This Emma, in my opinion, was particularly unlikable. Personally, I didn't think she had any redeemable traits. I didn't think she earned a redemption at the end for the things that she did. Whereas I think the source material and a lot of your adaptations and stuff, it shows her learning, and it also, Emma's not like mean, and I don't know if it's because of the things that she does in here. This book does address some important issues. So one of those being sexuality, and especially bisexuality. And I really liked that discussion because I think that there is a lot of nuance and conversations that aren't had surrounding bisexuality. And so it's this, I think it was a Writing Excuses podcast where they talked about this, where what you often have is, if you have a bi character and they end up in a relationship with somebody who is the opposite sex, their bisexuality is almost erased. And if they end up with somebody who is the same sex, they're almost lumped into being gay, lesbian, whatever, depending on how you identify, right? I think that that's an important conversation to have, and maybe I wouldn't have noticed this if it wasn't for that podcast, because it's not something I've personally ever given a lot of thought to. It's not something that personally impacts me, and I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I'm some super enlightened person that constantly thinks about those around me. I don't. I'm a selfish, self-centered person like everybody else in the world. And so I kind of liked seeing those conversations. And there's definitely specifically like bi-phobia kind of addressed in here. So people are like fine with gay characters, but there's like especially stereotypes to bi characters. And I think that that's an important conversation to have, because I think it is something you see in the real world too. It wasn't like some big deal, it was just stuff I noticed. Sexuality ended up playing a huge role in like the big tipping point thing that Emma does that's really bad, and I knew from the very beginning what she was gonna do. It was set up so obviously. Personally, I just found what she did really inappropriate and really gross, even though I knew she was gonna do it. And it's not that you can't have your character do that, that's fine. You can have your character do something really bad. I didn't think that it was well redeemed for me to support her getting like her happily ever after. But I mean, that's just my thoughts. Smash or trash. So I've said this before, there is a difference between a good or bad book or movie and a good or bad adaptation or retelling. Personally, like I said, I did not like this book. I gave it 2 stars. I would have DNF'd it. I did not like it. And honestly, as an adaptation, I would say trash as well. The reason for that mainly being, I don't know, I feel weird because I have another retelling, and that one's like way worse in my opinion. So it's like, do I call them both trash? I guess I do. This one is slightly less trash. This one's recycling. But she did make some of it her own, and I've said this before, I really do think you need to do that. And I do like that she talked about sexuality and she like changed things and had that, but pulled from certain aspects. Like you still have this like a matchmaker thing, but it just felt really flat, and it felt like it relied too heavily on Emma. Okay, so this will come as no surprise, but the next retelling I read was The Importance of Being Emma by Juliet Archer. And just like Emma Ever After, this was not a good book. I gave it 2 stars. I would have DNF'd it. It was probably worse than Emma Ever After. Also, I don't know if this is like a UK versus US covering type of thing, but this cover to me reads historical. And this is not a historical, it's a contemporary. It's like contemporary chick lit / romance. And I think that this was a really great example of how difficult it is to write a retelling. Reading this made me realize, like, it's so funny because I read a different book for a different version of this video, for like a different set of adaptations first before I did anything for this video. And that one was so good that I was like, oh my gosh, like retellings, it's like not like consciously, but I was like, well, retellings are like easy, like it's not hard. And then I read this and I was like, oh, they're not easy. And I think this was a perfect example of why. This book follows like plot point by plot point by plot point the original. Adding some sex doesn't mean you like made it your own, in my opinion. But it lacked any of like the heart or humor of the original. I think Emma is a funny book. It is a comedy and there are funny characters, but this seemed to be, when there was humor, it was less like you're laughing with the character at something that's written in a witty way as much, and is more making fun of people. Like I felt like the author really made Mr. Woodhouse a complete joke, and I do think he's funny. Like he's a hypochondriac and he's like crazy, but I think that there's a sweetness to him and a kindness to him, and other characters respect him in a way, and I didn't get that here. And I don't know, like sometimes the way she would write certain characters in certain scenes, it felt very judgy, and I don't typically feel like the author in a book is passing judgment, but here I did, and I didn't like it. I've said this multiple times now. I think it's really difficult to navigate source material while making something your own. And I really do think that in order to do a very good retelling, you have to make it your own. You can't just modernize it. You have to do something to make it yours. And I didn't think that this author did a good enough job of doing that. Also, I think after reading this, I now know why there are not a lot of Emma retellings. I think it's a hard story to tell. I think that it's really easy for the characters, especially Emma, to come across as unlikable and as somebody you don't understand. And I think in a lot of times people do not like her. And in even in the Austen version, I think that there are a lot of people who can't stand Emma. If you do get her and you're able to read it within the way that Austen, I think, was attempting to write it, you will enjoy it and you will see her and you will grow to kind of like her or understand her character. And so I think it is very difficult to write. I'm actually really curious to see Sonali Dev's writing of Emma. I think that'll be really interesting. Smash or trash? I'm gonna say trash. I just think that this was so unoriginal and boring and filled with unlikable characters. It didn't really explore the themes. It just, you have characters with the same names following the same plot. You basically rewrote Austen's novel and you just set it in the modern day. I know I read some reviews and some people were like, oh, Emma has an MBA from Harvard. Emma would never do that. And I just want to say, I agree. I think Austen's Emma would never do that. I read a review and she was like, Emma would have gone to college and she would have majored in like 7 things and never actually finished anything. And I have to say, I agree. I think that's what Austen's Emma would have done. I'm not bothered by the fact that the Emma in this story did more than that. That she did have a higher education and have a drive in a business capacity. That was like the only thing in this book, other than sex and Knightley getting a POV, that was like different and her own. Congrats, you did that. That's my thoughts on that one. So those are my thoughts on these Emma retellings and adaptations. Like I said before at the beginning of this, these are just my opinions. You are allowed to disagree with me. That's fine. We're all human. We all have our own opinions. If you haven't watched or read some of these and they sound interesting to you, even if I didn't like them, go for it. Personal preference is a thing. And just because I don't like something doesn't mean you won't like it. Also, I think I've learned through this a valuable lesson, and that is that Miss Bates needs a story. We stan Miss Bates, and I would love a Miss Bates story. So if any authors out there want to write one, please do so. I do know that Sonali Dev is currently doing a Austen inspired series. I'm going to talk about 2 of those books in future versions of these videos. And I believe her plan is to do all 6 Austen novels, and I'm super interested to see what she does with Emma, especially because she does very loose retellings. And I just think she's a great writer. Maybe I'll do like an addendum to this video, because I don't think I could ever do like a follow-up doing a ton unless like there was just this surge of adaptations and retellings. I do know I did not discuss the 2020 adaptation. I just already had so many adaptations to talk about, and it was just something that was more expensive for me to get my hands on. So I don't know, maybe I'll watch that, and if Sonali Dev does an Emma, maybe I'll do like a little follow-up and I will discuss those 2. I do plan, like I said, doing more of these in the future. Some of the ones I plan is I would like to do Beauty and the Beast, Pride and Prejudice, Persuasion, Cinderella. I think those are the big ones. I feel like Beauty and the Beast and Pride and Prejudice, there will probably be 2 parts to this, because both of those have a lot of adaptations and retellings. But that's loosely my plan. Like I said, I don't know how frequently these will come out. I would love to do them once a month, but there's just so much involved, and even if I've read or watched things in the past, I'm trying to read or re-watch them again to have a more recent frame of reference in talking about them. So it just requires a lot of time on my part. That's my plan. I don't know which one will be next. I have an idea, but I'm not 100% sure. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye.